Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the Sketchy app for having me. What we're going to do today is we're going to draw another portrait in Procreate. And I guess I should introduce myself for people that are joining new. I'm Lisa Filion. I'm an artist and art teacher from Ontario, Canada. And I love drawing on my iPad with an Apple Pencil, and I have a variety of classes in the Sketchy Art School that teach people how to draw portraits in various different styles using different techniques on their iPad. And my current class that's going on this month in August is all about color fun. So we're going to be working with color theory, and we've already created two portraits. So we did a complementary color scheme last week, and then this week is a monochromatic color scheme. So for today's YouTube video, I thought we would also work in a monochromatic color scheme. So I'm going to show you what I've been working on so far. I'm doing something a little bit different today. Normally I start these live broadcasts from scratch, but I actually started this portrait in advance because I always find that I'm a little bit rushed at the end to play with the colors and doing kind of the fun like textures and background stuff that I always want to fit in. So I kind of started, I cheated a little, I kind of started already. So what I would want to show you guys is just the process I've done so far. In my layer panel here, I have 3 layers. I have a sketch layer that has reduced opacity with kind of a gray pencil I used. I used the peppermint pencil in Procreate, so it's kind of a nice smudgy pencil. And then I have a color layer on top of it. For this one, I didn't do a color below layer. I just started right on top. And then I have a separate layer for her piercings because I wanted to make sure that I could still work on the skin tone on a different layer and not interfere with those piercings, which they're not finished yet. None of this is finished, so it's still a work in progress. If you guys are looking for this reference photo, it is going to be posted. Sketchy just mentioned in the comments there. They're going to be updating the reference photos shortly, so you guys can have access to it. It's a really cool photo. I love it. It's kind of asymmetric in its composition. You know, the hands cut off. She's kind of cropped in an interesting way. Right now, I haven't made so much negative space in mine at the top, but that's something we can play around with and change later on as well. But I loved this pose, and I thought this would be a great one to do for monochromatic because monochromatic, as you guys probably know, is using one single color and all the shade tints, tones, and intensities of that color. So we're mostly working with this kind of peachy kind of brown color scheme, and of course there's some like blondes mixed in there as well, which will be kind of our lighter highlights. So it's kind of this like golden brown color scheme, and I've gone ahead and created a color palette. And in my sketchy class, the color fun class, I teach you guys how to do a color palette at the very beginning so that you know how to create your own palettes from a variety of different sources. And so this was a simple color palette that I did, kind of grabbing some of the key colors that I wanted to do in this monochromatic color scheme. And it's almost like 2 monochromatic color schemes in one because the top row is the monochromatic color of brown. So it's all different shades, tints, tones of brown. And then the bottom one is more in the goldens, but I think they work together. We're going a little bit analogous here, but overall it's going to read as a monochromatic scheme. So I'm just gonna, because I've started my sketch already, I'm hopefully also gonna have a little bit more time to read your comments or questions. So if you guys have questions at any time, please post them in the comment section and I will be sure to look up for my drawing and answer any questions that you might have, or just say hello. I love seeing you guys are from all around the world, which is amazing. So hi to everybody who's joining me today. Thank you so much for coming. So what I want to show you is I want to show you the time-lapse feature in Procreate. If you go up to the wrench icon, which is your actions panel, you can click on video, which I already have selected, and The default should be that you already have time-lapse recording selected, so you can see how that the toggle is set to on. And if that's not your default right now, I would recommend turning that on, because what that means is that every one of your drawings, a time-lapse is being recorded of every single stroke that you make, and the time-lapse is sped up so that it's not too onerous to watch. So I'm going to show you guys my time-lapse so far so that you can see this process here play through. So you can see this is just me using really rough kind of sketch gestural lines. And then what I did there is I reduced the opacity, and I actually created another sketch layer on top. And then when I was done with my first sketch layer, I just deleted it. So that's why right now you can only see that I have one sketch layer, but technically there are two. And then here's where I start to lay down the color. So using that palette that I was just showing you guys as the base, and then of course I'm adding a few extra colors in there, adding some pinks and peaches. Some golds are going to be added for the earrings, and then also the blue of the eyes. So this is like just a really like base coat, and you can actually zoom in on your time lapses, which is a really cool feature. So right now you can see some of the detail work that's being done on the eyebrows and the eyes, the mouth. And so as I go along, I'm fixing my proportion. I don't know if you noticed before when I was toggling back and forth between the sketch and the, so that's done, the sketch and the colored area, but you can actually see how much the proportions have changed, because this is really different than this. So a lot of those proportions I start to adjust and change as I color over top, and I just use that sketch as kind of a guiding force. So yeah, I wanted to show you guys that so far. So if you have any questions, whether it's about this class or any of the other sketchy classes maybe you're interested in, or anything about Procreate or drawing portraits in general, please don't hesitate to ask, and I'll just keep drawing right now. So I'm gonna stay on this colored layer and zoom right in, and we'll zoom in here. And we'll just add a little bit more dimension right now. So if I go to my palette, I'm going to choose one of my darker browns, but then I'm going to take my color wheel and skew it more towards the reds, because a lot of these highlights that you can see around the eye are more in the reddy brown tones. And I like doing this because I can kind of add to my palette. So do the same thing with this intensity and then just grab it there. So I'm grabbing kind of the same intensity on my color wheel here, except that I'm just simply moving the color to a different area. Hopefully that makes sense. So if I go to here, I'll just show you again and then move it to the reds. Now I'm going to grab that pink. Same with up here, move it to the reds. And it's kind of a good exercise to do, I find. It's helped me a lot. If I move that to the reds, it should still probably be mostly white. It's a bit pink. It's hard to tell. It's a little bit more pinky than the original. Yeah, I find this a good exercise to do, because once you've kind of nailed down how much difference you want between the different values, then you can use that as a guide for any other values you want to create in your palettes. So we're gonna grab maybe this middle kind of pink brownie color, and I'm going to switch over to the gouache brush, and I'm going to reduce the opacity of the brush. And then we're just going to get in there and very painterly just kind of, I'm not pressing hard with my Apple Pencil. What I'm doing right now is I'm just kind of painting over top of what I've already done. But I want to make everything a bit more 3D because it's a little bit flat at the moment. And I'm paying attention to, okay, what areas have those darker kind of peachy colors? I've really enjoyed the current class that we're doing, the Color Fun class that's running for the month of August. If you haven't had a chance to sign up for the class yet, you still can. You don't have to do it in real time. You can do it at your own pace. Any of the classes are like that. So if you're interested in the class, we should be posting a link in this video to the exact class. And it's a good kind of refresher of color theory, or if you're new to color theory, it kind of introduces you to some of the key concepts. But then I also show you more specifically how I use color theory to approach portraiture on the iPad. So hopefully people that are in the class already, hopefully you guys are enjoying it. I've really enjoyed seeing everyone's drawings. So now I've kind of switched over to a more brown, which I should have mentioned, and I am just kind of continuing with this. So just very lightly adding color and shading. And there's also some like purple grays in there, which I started to put in before actually, so I can actually grab it. So this is how you color pick in Procreate. You tap and hold, and you can grab a color that you've previously put down and reuse it, which is nice. So once you've done your palette and you've worked with those colors for a while, you can kind of get into the flow of not always having to go back to the palette. You can actually start color picking. Kind of just depends what you get into the habit of doing. So I like to color pick a lot at this stage, which is again one of the reasons why I wanted to not start this portrait from scratch with you guys today. So yeah, we missed out a little bit on the sketching component of it, but I think this will be better for the color component, because you can kind of see how even at the place that it was at, you could be tempted to say that that could have been done at that point, but I think these extra layers of color that we're going to be adding to it is really going to make a huge difference. So I want to get that triangle kind of shadow in there, so I'm really going to work this now. And then at this point too, it's good practice to zoom in and out a little bit so you're not tunnel visioned on what you're doing. And also zoom in and out on your reference too. So I have my iPad set to split screen mode, where you can have it half a screen. I rarely have it half a screen because I like my canvas to take up more space than my reference, but it can be handy sometimes when you really want to zoom in or, you know, do something side by side like this. So it does come in handy once in a while. But I like having it kind of like this, where most of my screen is still made up of my drawing. So I want to get the cheekbone here. So this shading that we're doing right now, this is what's going to make the portrait look a lot more 3D. And I haven't forgotten about her freckles either. I'm going to show you guys a cool trick for freckles that I like to use with portraits in Procreate. And oftentimes I'll do circles on the tip of the nose and the chin, and then I'll shade kind of in a circular fashion. So I just did a dark circle, and now I'm taking my lighter color and blending away the top portion. And I find this is just a nice method to quickly kind of capture volume. And then of course we need to make under the lips darker. So I'm just using some of that purpley gray color again. A true monochromatic color scheme can be a really nice exercise in color, because even though you're using color, and you can use it actually pretty boldly, you are still limiting your palette. This one is a little bit of a, like I said, it's not pure monochromatic. It's in the analogous slash monochromatic kind of family, and so this definitely has more colors than, say, what we did in our lesson this week, which was almost a true monochromatic portrait. So again, I'm going to color grab just to, that forehead's just too light, so I kind of want to blend it all in. And if you set your smudge tool to also the same brush, so I just set it to the gouache brush, then you can also use that to just smooth out any areas. And I like to use it a little bit sparingly so that I can still see some brush marks. I don't want it perfectly smooth for the style that I'm aiming for. So I'm just gonna take a look at the comments here. Hi everyone. So people from all over the world. Herb is from Hawaii. Very cool. I want to visit Hawaii one day. And Julie from the UK. Hi guys. Oh, and Mexico. I love Mexico. I try to go there every year. And a couple people saying they are enjoying the color fun class. Thanks, Jenny. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I've really enjoyed it as well. So hi everyone. Remember, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so zooming out. Okay, so just kind of continuing along here. I haven't done too much with the neck yet, so I'll maybe go into that a little bit. And obviously I haven't done anything with the hair, just a really basic kind of gray shading. So I'm doing a bit of an outline under the chin, but I don't want it to stay as an outline. So I will be color picking colors around that chin and then just blending them over top of each other. Because I want that jawline to stand out, but not be an outline, if that makes sense. And just kind of add some highlights back in here. So anything that got a little too dark, just going to add back in. And then I'm going to also take this brush tool and just smear this a little bit. And then I want to have a little bit more of a highlight on the nose. So I've got that. A little bit of a highlight around the nostril. It's funny what a little well-placed highlight or shadow can really do for a portrait. I'm going to do a bit of a highlight on top of the eye. And then also make sure I keep that bottom lid standing out and making it a little light. And I also want to bring back in a little bit more definition to the lips as well, because I think I lost them a bit. So I'm just taking a look here. Julie asks, Lisa, do you ever start a picture that you just struggle with and then you give up on? Yes. I've had a few of those, or some of them I don't post publicly because I'm just never happy with them. Or there's even cases where I have posted things I'm not happy with too. And it's funny, right? Like posting things online, and it's like it's a very private thing to create art and to draw, and then to publicly post it, you feel like all of a sudden people are going to be looking at it, right? And that can be scary. And one thing I love about the sketchy community is just how supportive everyone is. And I've never seen anybody say anything negative. I've only seen kind comments and constructive criticism on sketchy, so that's been amazing. But yeah, to answer your question, for sure, like if I go to my gallery, I have a few unfinished things. Let's see, things that I never finished for sure. I know I have them on here. Um, or I've deleted them. There's that too. Okay, so here's an unfinished one. I should really go back to it. That was a cool picture. Um, that one I left unfinished too. That was also a cool picture. Sometimes maybe I just forget too. Like I started something and then got busy with another project and then forgot to go back to it. This one too is unfinished. This one I never posted, and yet I worked so hard on it. So it's kind of monochromatic too. And I think I just didn't know what to do with the background. And then I kind of liked it white and keeping the straps white and kind of empty as well. But I guess I worked a long time on it, and then I thought, I don't know if it's finished. So I never posted it, and I still don't know if it's finished. And then there's stuff that I will come back to too. So yeah, there's definitely things that I guess give up on, but I don't think I really fully gave up on them unless I delete them, and that's pretty rare. I rarely delete an artwork. I definitely have before. I hate to admit that, but most of them just kind of sit unfinished in my gallery. Um, Another question is curious how fast it usually takes you to finish a portrait. You've been doing things end to end really quickly in a good way. During the classes, it takes me so much longer. Part of that is just practice. I think I probably used to be a lot slower at completing a portrait because I didn't have nailed down exactly what I wanted to do, or I wasn't super familiar 100% with the tools and how they functioned, or like you just draw so many portraits over time that it becomes easier to nail down proportions quicker, because it used to take me a lot longer to do the initial sketch, I would say, than it does now, just because in the last several years portraiture has really been the thing that I focus mostly on drawing. um, that doesn't mean that I don't struggle. I have some artworks that just take longer because I'm either just taking my time and enjoying them, or I'm struggling and nothing's working out. I'm just having an off day or days. So yeah, I don't know. Sometimes even the stuff that I do here on YouTube or in the classes, um, I'm like happy at the time, and then I mean, for the stuff that I do in the classes, sometimes when I see them posted later on for the classes, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have spent a little bit more time and I would have had the time to go back and do this and that. So I think it's one of those things where sometimes you never know when something's done. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think practice makes it quicker. But I still look at a lot of the stuff that I do quickly, like in the classes, and think, oh, if I only had 1 more hour to work on that, I could have made it really good, or So, so yeah, it's one of those things, and sometimes I overwork things too. That's the other thing. So the classes actually have really helped me grow as well, because it's kind of this final point where I need to cut things off, and I think that's been really good for me because. Um, I'm someone that could keep working it, and I probably should have stopped like, 5 hours before. So that's also a learning lesson as well. Okay. I think I've answered most of your questions so far, but keep them coming, guys. Oh yeah, I'm on the blender. Okay, so I'm just going to do a bit of, again, like an outline to define the face shape a bit more. And I got to figure out where I want to put the neck. So I think it's around this line here. And then we can kind of work on the hair from there. I'm not done the skin, but I want to move on, and I want to create a new layer and name it Freckles. And I've done this before in other classes and other demonstrations. So what I love to do for skin tones, whether it's like the texture of pores or the texture or shape of freckles, is to use the spray paint in Procreate. And I love using the Flicks spray paint. And then the reason why I always do it on a separate layer is because I can have a lot more control that way. So I want to find a nice brown shade that's going to be similar to most of her freckles. And you'll want to, when you're doing this, to make it as natural as possible, change the size and the opacity from time to time. So that's obviously way too big. So you can see that you can just kind of place it down. I also, sometimes when I'm stamping, I prefer to use my finger over my Apple Pencil. So put a few down, and don't worry if it's on the eye or if it goes in a random place, because this brush is a little bit random. And make a few different sizes and make some different opacities. I like to do the big ones on smaller opacities. And then even like grab a different color for the freckle as well. So I've grabbed more of like a peachy color too. I'm just gonna move over here so I can see more. And you can even take a highlight as well. And I would use the highlight a little bit more sparingly, but it can have kind of this nice opposite effect. So something like that. And then you can also use spray paint in and around like eye areas to show, like, the very sensitive skin under your eye, to show that texture. You could use a finer spray paint under there. And so this is a really fine brush. And so I'm just going to keep kind of texturing, layering. Again, I'm going right over the eyes, guys, because we're going to do a trick later. And then you might want a few, so I don't want to go that bold, but you might want a few that are a bit darker. Okay. So I am paying attention to my portrait, but obviously these are a little bit random, so they're not exact. But of course, with something like freckles, I mean, you would drive yourself insane trying to make it exactly like the reference. So I'm going to add a little bit of a peachy freckle in there too. So once you've done enough, you're going to change your eraser to something like one of the brushes you've been using. So for example, gouache. And this time it's right now at 100%. So I'm going to go around my edge and first of all clean up anything that's outside of my portrait's edge and clean up a bit of the neck because she doesn't really have too many freckles on her neck. And then I go in, sorry, I'll just do that there. And then I go in and start looking at, okay, any spots that she's doesn't have so many freckles, I'm going to go in and erase. And you can reduce your opacity, or if you're using a pressure sensitive stylus like the Apple pencil, you can just do this really lightly. So I have hardly any pressure on my pencil. And of course, I gotta go into the eyes, make sure there's no freckles there. Clean that up. And again, you might want to zoom in and out. You can make this brush bigger, smaller. You can go over large sections if you want, or you could reduce the opacity right on this slider as well. So by touching the N, you could reduce the opacity here. I prefer my eraser method though, because then I can keep some things more opaque and some things more translucent. So I like it better that way personally. So now we've just like laid down some freckles in a pretty organic way. So I wanted to show you guys that. And then I want to do another layer on top and call it hair. And we're gonna have some fun with the hair. I want to try to use a few different brushes. So let's start with a painting brush. We're gonna go to painting and we're going to go to, actually, why don't we use turpentine? And so she's got this great like windblown hair. So I want to go into the blondes and then kind of an ash blonde. So just pull it a little bit more into the gray. And the turpentine is a very painterly, like oil paint kind of brush. So I'm going to use it to give this portrait a little bit more drama. Again, I'm on a different layer, so it doesn't really matter if I go over the skin because I can touch that up later. In some ways I would want to do this under the skin, but I think I'm going to leave it like this. So I'm going to get some white kind of highlights in there. And I want to really capture this piece of hair, the movement of it. In my work, I often like to keep the hair a little bit more abstract and painterly instead of doing a more realistic approach to hair. But of course, if you want to do a more realistic approach, I'll show you guys how I would do that in a second. So I'm worried it's going to look a little too greeny, so I'm going to try to add in a bit more of a yellow just to make it look a bit more golden. And then you could change your brush, your eraser brush also to turpentine. And before I do that, I'm going to actually take away some of the color underneath because I don't want it to really affect what we're doing. So I'm going underneath and I'm just erasing some of that under layer. And then on the sketch too, I don't really want all of these sketch lines to show, so I'm just going to go in and erase some of those. And then go back to hair. So then what I would do is I would take my eraser back on my gouache brush and clean up the edges around her face. And what I want to do next is take like almost a silvery color, and we're going to use the peppermint pencil under sketching to kind of go in and again outline, I would say, more of the shape of the hair. So actually I'm going to make it a little darker. I'm going to reduce the opacity a bit. So I'm using the pencil just to rough in the flow of the hair and the individual strands, not all of them. This piece is going to come out of here. So something like that. And then I'm going to take white and really go in and do a precise job around the hairline. And also even around the face too. So I don't think I want to go that light actually, but I might just fix the face shape slightly with a gray. And now I'm using more of a golden toned color to put the darker areas of the hair in. And this doesn't quite have the flow that I want it to have yet, but we'll keep working on that. But what I do want to do is go back to the ear because it's definitely very unfinished at this point. And I'll zoom in. And I might even, at this point, want to draw in a bit of the earring. So I'm going to go on the piercings layer. So maybe something like this. I'm still using the peppermint pencil right now too. I'm just using a bit on the side of my pencil to color in shapes. And we're going to fix this later on. But that at least kind of gets things started. And then go back to the color layer. And again, I'm just going to keep using that peppermint pencil because why not? Add in some peaches. And then you might want to color grab some colors from the skin to make sure it matches. And then take your blender. And this is, this is blending monochromatic colors, right? So these peachy browns, laying down the colors and then blending them together. And then if it's gone too far in any way, go back in with the highlight. So Julie asks, what is your favorite medium to work in away from Procreate? Do you find there are many transferable skills from traditional digital? Yeah, that's a good question. My favorite medium is acrylic painting, and probably because the one thing that I can't do digital that I love doing with acrylic painting is working large scale. But I do find a lot of transfer. So I don't know if you can see in the background my Frida painting there. You can kind of see her there. So that's an acrylic painting. I love doing acrylic paintings on wood. So the last few years, that's been kind of my style, and to have exposed wood in the background. So the background of her doesn't have any paint. It's just the raw canvas of the wood. And so yeah, that's my favorite thing to do other than Procreate. And I kind of go back and forth between doing the two things. And the transferable skills for sure come into play when it comes to proportion and scaling a portrait onto a canvas, and that comes into play in Procreate, of course, too. And then also another transferable skill is layering of paint. So one thing that I personally think can really make a portrait successful is to really have it have a lot of rich layers. And so that's something I think that I take away from painting a lot, is just knowing that, you have to work the paint, you have to layer it, you do a base coat, and then you go over top of it and you add more details, and it's that layering process. So as you can see, that really naturally translates into Procreate, especially since, there's something called layers, and it makes it really easy for you to actually do all of these layering techniques over top of each other. So that's the biggest thing that I think that painting has taught me. And in a lot of my portraits, I do lay down a base layer of color first. For any of you guys who have maybe been in any of my classes, you might have noticed that I often teach by doing a sketch and then doing a base color below the sketch layer, and then doing a color over layer. And so that's something that I definitely learned from traditional painting. Okay, so I just, did something that I always do. I'm on the hair layer, but I just put a little eyebrow highlight in there. But I mean, it's technically hair, right? So it can stay on the hair layer. So you might have seen when I was on the color layer, I just started doing like a little bit of hatching. And so just to add like a little bit more interest into the skin tone, again, taking like colors. So taking the colors from the canvas that you've already placed down and then just doing a little cross hatching in some of the shaded areas can be a really nice effect. So I'm just going to do that. I just want to add a bit of texture into the skin. And then when you zoom out, it has a completely different look, I find, than when you're looking at it up close. So I'm just kind of playing around with just adding that bit of texture in. Especially I think I want to add it to this nose area here. And under the eyes. And I think that like the orangey tones will look great next to the blue eyes, so I want to kind of accentuate that a little bit. And the fun thing about color is, I mean, I am inspired by the color of this source photo here, which is an amazing reference to work from, but at the same time, constantly thinking about, okay, how do you embellish that? What makes your artwork different from the photograph? So I think that the way that we use color and color layering and texture, all of those things are going to make a real difference. Okay, again, I'm just doing a little cross hatching here. The side, just to suggest a bit of shadow on the side. And I might actually have to put more freckles just above her lip here. So I might have to go back in and do that. And normally I tell people to put eyelashes on a different layer, but I think in this case, like I'm just gonna suggest some light colored eyelashes. You know what the heck, we're gonna do them on a new layer. So I'll call them eyelashes. And because she's so fair skinned, I don't want to use black for the eyelashes. I want to use a brown. And I probably just want to keep using the peppermint pencil because she's got really natural looking eyelashes. So just something that's a little bit sketchy. And I'm going to darken and accentuate the corners of the eyes because it makes a huge difference when you zoom out. And then I might go back to that color layer and I'm going to accentuate also the blue around her eyes. Just darken things up a little bit, make it a little bit more punchy. And also just accentuate the light in the eyes too. It's kind of like this cone shape that's radiating from the pupil. And then I'm going to go back to the hair. I like to jump around a lot, if you guys have noticed. So for the hair, another thing that you can use is under touch-ups, there are hair brushes that come loaded into Procreate. So I'm going to choose the flowing hair brush. And you just kind of got to kind of play with it to get it to the right setting. So I have it fairly large but half opacity right now. I'm going to reduce the opacity even a bit more because she's so fair. And I actually might even just make this color a little bit more fair. Okay, something like that. And it's okay if it gets dark at first because, again, it's all about layering. So we can do the darks. You might even want to do your hair on a few different layers. I've definitely done that in the past too, if I'm trying to do something a little bit more realistic with the hair. So something like that. And because her hair is so fair, I kind of want to have the background a different color. So I'm going to go to my layers and choose background color. And why don't we grab one of these monochromatic colors that we're working with and see which one we like best. I could do so many different options. Look how different they all look together too. Oh, I kind of like the pink. No, okay. I think we're gonna go with this one for now. Can't make up my mind. Okay, so we're going to keep up with the hair, and this just it's funny how changing the background color, now you can see all of my mistakes that I did on the hair, and I knew they were there, but they just weren't as visible before. So now we can really go in and try to fix any of those things we don't like. And I think this actually drops a little bit lower than what I have. And that actually probably goes a bit higher. So I'm also still paying attention to proportions. So if I have to go in and erase, we can do that. And I might even just feather my edges a little bit. So I'm taking an eraser. This is the gouache brush. And I'm just going in and kind of erasing the edges. Actually, that's kind of cool too. Look what happens if I erase, right? If we want to use any of the highlights from, or the lowlights for our portrait too, because now I'm on the portrait, or I was on the portrait layer. You could play around with that too and have the background colors show through. But that might be getting a little too crazy. Okay. And I really love playing around with opacities in this way because I find this is a really kind of painterly exercise. So just going to get everything the way that I want it. So for the neck, I'm going to clean up that line. And then that way on the hair layer, we can keep using our hairbrush. The hairbrush is one of those brushes I find, for me anyway, it takes a while to get the hang of what angle to use it, and then once you kind of figure it out and play with it for a while, it can be really useful. I might kind of accentuate those pieces a little bit more. And then I would probably at this point too also go back to a paintbrush and paint in some areas where there's shadow, just because you can get a lot more control with your paintbrush. And as I'm doing this, I want to kind of fix this jawline too, because I'm again noticing proportion problems or things that I want to touch up. I feel like every part that you do of the portrait is like a little different piece of the puzzle. And so you can see, you know, you might think you're finished an area, but if you really look carefully when you go to do something else, then that'll really change what that one area that you thought you finished looks like. So it's always good to not feel like you're completely finished until you're done. That you're always looking. And then I love taking the background color with portraits like these because it's just such a nice way to just blend the paint in. And then I would also take like an orangey peach for the top of the forehead. And then I have a hair layer. I'm going to make a second hair layer. You can call it hair 2, hair over, highlights, whatever you want to call it. And then on the hair below layer, a little trick is you can make the whole thing a little bit darker. Something like that's fine. And then go over top. And maybe I'll use turpentine again. I might go back to the hairbrush in a second too. But these are kind of things where you'd place your top pieces of hair. So something like this. Oh, I'm on the eraser tool, that's why. Has that ever happened to you guys where you don't notice you're on the eraser and you're like, why isn't this painting? I don't know, that's a little streaky for my liking, so I'm gonna blend that out a little bit. I think I liked the hairbrush better, so go to touch-ups. I might also go to back to, sorry, drawing, no, not drawing, sketching, to the peppermint pencil. Now you guys can probably see why I needed to start this portrait in advance. This is one of those portraits that I just knew it was going to take me longer than our allotted time. And then we can do a bit of a shadow effect. You could do this shadow on a separate layer from the hair or on the same layer. It's up to you. So I'm just going to do it like that and then blend it out. And I'm also going to go back to my original portrait layer. Sorry, I'm going to fix that first. And go back to my original portrait layer and keep working the shadows. And you could again do this on a different layer and call it shadows. And I'm just going to fix up this neckline. Haven't even got to the hand yet. That's a whole other thing. Another trick that I've been doing lately is duplicating my color layer and then playing around with the new color layer so that if you make any mistakes or you don't like the direction that you've taken it, you can always go back to what you had before. So this has been kind of something that I've currently been doing a lot of, because then you can do crazy things like this and not worry that you're ruining anything. So I'm just kind of blocking in shadows right now, and then I'm going to blend them out. Again, instead of duplicating the whole color layer, you could just simply create a new layer called shadows. That would be another way of doing that. And anything you don't like, you can delete. So I'm going to erase it because there's the exact same color layer underneath. I'm going to up the drama a little bit, so this is going to be a bit more orange. Do her cheek a little bit more orange. And I'm just going to take a look at comments. If you guys have any questions or comments, please let me know. Otherwise, I will just keep drawing. So I kind of want to, on this layer, go back and make things stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to use peppermint to do that, the pencil. And I might go on the eyelash layer right now. I actually think what's happening is one of my hair layers is just covering it a little bit here. Oh yeah, because it had the shadow on it, right. So we'll just go like that. And just take that away a bit. And then I'll go back over here eyelashes. I'm deciding to do a bit more of an outline here because I feel like I was losing some of the features, so I'm going to go in and fix that now. And then I'm going to take the smudge tool and any areas that I don't want to be really crisp, I'm going to smudge them out. And then I'm going to go to that other color layer, and I think I'm going to deal with more the shape of the face a bit. So on the peppermint pencil still, I'm going to use the white. And I'm going to actually go on, I'm going to merge my hair layers together just because I can't remember what's on what layer, so it's just going to be easier for me to do that. Usually I would recommend not merging layers and combining layers instead of merging them. But in an instance like that, I'm not too worried about merging them because I can always create another hair layer over top to do anything highlight wise that I might want to do to the hair, so there was really no risk. And this is, of course, on the hair layer right now, which is not ideal. So let me actually go back. I'm not happy with that. Might be best to actually make a color over layer that's over top of everything and then do what I want to do on it. Sometimes if you just get in too deep with your layers and you just need to, touch something up, this would be kind of a good little way around that. So I'm trying to fix that face shape a little bit. And same with the chin. I'm going to use the background color just to help me a little bit. And then I'm just using some kind of like hatching lines to make that look more natural around the face. And I also want to show you guys a trick that I use for proportions as well. So in a second, I think I'll be at that point. So I'm noticing as I'm doing this, there are a couple of proportions that are kind of driving me crazy. But I'm pretty far in right now that I don't want to, undo and redraw a whole bunch of areas. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to use the liquefy tool in just a second. To deal with proportion. So I like to have the portrait kind of lined up to my reference, roughly. And it's okay that it's different because I know it's not exactly the same, it's hand drawn. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first layer and I'm going to click on it and click combine down. And now I've created a new group and I'm going to just keep going combine down, combine down, combine down, and grabbing all of these layers that I've created into this one group. And then in that group, and this is also a way of organizing your layers too, so that they're nice and neat if you wanted to separate background and foreground elements. And then what you can do within this group is you can go to liquefy. Whoops, sorry, wrong one. Liquefy. Make sure you're on push. And you can touch up proportion ever so slightly here by moving around your portrait. I might have to kind of zoom out more to be able to see. If you don't like it, you can go back or you can press reset and it'll reset it, which is nice. And you can make the size of your pull bigger or smaller depending on what you want to do. It was mostly the eye that was bugging me, so just want to do a couple little touch-ups like that. I don't know if I made it better or worse. I've definitely done this before where I've regretted it and made it worse, so that could be happening right now. But it's kind of a neat trick for being able to do little tweaks with proportion if you get to the point in the portrait where you're not happy with something. Might do a little bit more with these piercings. And then I'm gonna go back to my gouache brush and just use it to shade and color in certain areas. And same with on the nose ring. So I was saying earlier in this video that sometimes everybody has good days and bad days, or it takes them longer to do things. I think I'm having an off day because I just feel like this is taking longer than it normally would. But it's actually a pretty complicated portrait in a lot of ways. So that's okay. I can just take my time with it. Last week we drew a dog, so that was a little bit different. We're gonna do human portraits, I think, for the rest of August. And you guys can keep joining me every Wednesday for the rest of the month. Same time, same place. And we're gonna do portraits together, and they're going to be based on color schemes from the new class, the Color Fun class. And if you haven't signed up for the class, you can still sign up at any time and work at your own pace. All the videos will be there for lifetime access. Okay, well, the piercings look a little better now. At least they're in there. I definitely want to do something with this hand before it's too late. So let's call this hand. I liked in this portrait how it got cut off. So I'm going to use my gouache brush. And so because the hand is going to be obviously in the same color scheme as the rest of the skin tone, you can see I just kind of blocked in the shadows and highlights, or like kind of roughly blocked it in. But you can grab the colors that you've already put down, which will save you some time. And then I think you'll want to just maybe go in and have some fun. So I hate to add outlines, but they're not really going to be there in the end because we're going to blend them out. So I'm just going to kind of add them for now so we can see what we're doing. Something like that. And again, a cool trick is to use your background color. So I'm on the background color right now, and use it kind of to do your shadows to blend things out when you're doing a monochromatic color scheme. So this will be the side with some shadows. I want to add some pinks. So So I grabbed it from her lips. And I definitely want to add some highlights with the whites. And so it's funny with just a few well-placed shades, you all of a sudden can hopefully start to see the beginnings of the arm take shape. And then we could color in the whole thing. Add in some orangey brown. Little glow of orange there. And then take our smudge tool and then go in, and you can use the smudge tool just to make those edges not so outlined. Okay, and we can keep working on that, but that's kind of just a little bit of a rough of the hand. I'm gonna make another layer and call it shirt. Whoops, could spell that right. Okay. And she's wearing a black shirt in the drawing, and I do like kind of like the bit of blue in there as well. So I think I actually want to go really, really dark navy, so almost black, but a little bit of navy mixed in. And maybe we can have a little bit of fun with the shirt. So what I thought we could do is, why don't we use the watercolor brush? And it's a fun brush to use because it really does have this like nice kind of wet on wet look to it. And I know I'm like cheating a little bit. Now it's like it started off more monochromatic, it got a little analogous, and now even I think we're going a little bit more into you could even call it complementary, right? Because we have the orangey brown that's going to complement well with this blue. And we want to move that shirt below everything else. So I'm actually going to just drag it below everything except for the sketch. And it's looking a lot better already, being dragged below. And the idea is to make it really rough, right? It's not supposed to be perfect. And I like also taking my own custom watercolor brushes. So I've created my custom watercolor pack here from Real Watercolor. And I like taking those and doing a bit of like a stamping technique in the shirt. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn Alpha Lock on. And that's going to mask the areas outside of the shirt so they can't get paint on them. And then I'm just going to take these brushes and I'm just stamping down some paint. And I just want to give it that real like watercolory effect. And I also want to grab actually some of the background and have a bit of the background kind of creep in a little bit. So just doing that by stamping outside of the space. I also might want to try a different brush for certain parts. So you have to kind of play around with the stamping and the placement until you get it right. I have some watercolor drips I could use. That could be kind of cool, dripping down. I don't know, something like that maybe. And it's not finished. I want to go to the hair, and I still want to keep working on that. So we're going to go with the flowing hairbrush. And I want to do those kind of like baby hairs that you see around the hairline just to make it look a bit more natural. So this hair too, I'm actually going to put it over that color overlayer so that it actually does cover up some of what I did there. You could also take the background color, or you can take alternatively your eraser on the same tool, the hair tool, and I would suggest just going in and cleaning up edges, and you might have to switch between your different hair layers or merge them. I thought I did merge them already. Maybe I undid that. Sometimes that happens. I think that looks better already, just going in with the eraser tool and pulling some of that out. And then you could do the same thing on the upper layer. And also smudge anything out that you want to. I'm going to go back to painting and watercolor and just add a little bit of, again, a shadow here with the watercolor paint. Blend it out. And I do want to make this more painterly, but before we do that, if we want it to be a little bit more like the composition here, we can play around with composition too. Because I made everything in this layer group, you could now take your selection tool and you could choose where you want to place this portrait on the screen. So you can rotate it too so that it's more like the original. Kind of play around with that. I kind of like it like maybe in there. And then obviously I got to do something with this corner. So go back to my group, go back to my shirt layer, and you have a few options. You could take the shirt and just continue it beyond the page. So, oh, right, it's alpha locked. I'm like, why can't I smudge? So take it off of alpha lock, and you can take your smudge tool and you could just have it kind of fade into the background. Which I kind of like actually, because I think I want to do something more painterly in this corner. So then what I want to do is above that shirt layer, I'm just going to call this paint. And we're going to use some of the reds and the browns and the different colors of the background. And I want to use a favorite brush that I use for backgrounds, the Nico Roll. And I don't really want to do the bricks because I just don't have that kind of patience, but I was thinking we could do something like kind of cool where it's not really the same angle, but it's close. Like we could do some stripes. So to get a straight line in Procreate, you just hold, so you let it snap. So I don't know, we could do something like that. I'm not sure if I'm convinced of that yet. A blue, if we want to bring in and not make this entirely monochromatic, that could be kind of cool. I kind of like that idea of it weirdly going over here. I like the idea of the background kind of blending in to the portrait. And then around the portrait, I was thinking I could do a little bit of pink. I feel like I lost some of my shirt there, so I kind of want to keep that back. It's kind of amazing what you can do with the background color. So I'll zoom in so you guys can see better. But just with a few strokes, you can really take your portrait in a whole new, more abstract direction. Of course, if that's something you want to do. You could also, on your eraser tool, take something like my watercolor brushes, right, that has a shape to it. And if you make this bolder, you could also use the fact that you have this colored background and pull it out of the background. And maybe I want to do that with something that's a bit more opaque actually. So my Splatter 1 brush, oh right, it's on the eraser tool. The Splatter 1 brush, yeah, something like that. I like that. Too much maybe. Gotta have like this fine balance. Oh, that was a happy accident. I just made a mistake there, but I liked it. Yeah, something like that maybe. I don't know. We'll play around with it. Yeah, I'll keep working on it. It's definitely not 100% finished, and it turned out not really to be monochromatic. So I know this week in our lessons was monochromatic, but I mean, we started with monochromatic intent and then it kind of went another direction as art sometimes does. I'm just going to read your comments before I say goodbye. Let's see here. A lot of people are saying hi. Hi, thank you for joining me today. Carmen says, totally new to Procreate, and I'm frustrated at not being able to get reference photos on screen with my new canvas. Can't get to actual drawing and painting because of this. Carmen, are you talking about my like split screen view? Because I'll show you how to do that. And if you're not talking about that, I'll show you about something else too in a second. But for split screen, First of all, you want to make sure your iPad is up to date. If you're running an older model of iPad, it's possible that the iOS doesn't support split screen view. But if you have a model within the last few years, or if you have any of the Pro models, then you should be able to do split screen view. So I'll show you how to do it. You're just going to swipe up from the bottom until you see your taskbar. So you see how you have that line there? I just swiped up. So you have the taskbar. You want to make sure you have Photos or Safari or wherever you're getting your reference from, Sketchy, open on your taskbar already. If it's not, if it's something you use a lot, so for example, my Photos is where I save my reference photos from Sketchy. I save them to my camera roll and then I open them in the Photos app. So I put Photos permanently on my dock by just dragging the icon off my iPad onto the dock. And then I take that little icon and I drag it on the screen and I don't let go. Instead, I bring it to my left side until I see it grayed out like this and snap it in place. And then I use this slider to make it the size that I want. Another alternative, if you have an older iPad and you can't get split screen to work, you could in Procreate create your canvas like usual, and you could import by going to the wrench, going add, insert a photo, choose your photo reference. So this is one that I want to do down the road. And a lot of artists will just have that photo reference in a corner of their screen while they're drawing. And then you want to make sure you lock that layer. So you swipe and lock it so that now your drawing would be on a different layer. And then, of course, when you're finished, you can just delete that layer, unlock it, and delete. So that's what I would recommend in terms of getting a photo onto your screen. Hopefully that helps you out. Because I hate to hear that you're frustrated with using your iPad because of that. So hopefully that helps. I'll just go back to my drawing here for a second while we're talking over here. So, and thanks, Carmen. She says she loves my calm pace. That's good because sometimes I'm pretty calm, but sometimes I feel like I'm not as calm as I could be inside. So that's nice to know. Hi, Cynthia. And Patricia asks, how do you mask an area in order to do a background without touching the face? Oh, okay. So that's a good question. So I think I'll show you on another layer or another page as well. So let's see. I guess I'll do it in this one. Right, I gotta unlock and then delete. So let's say you draw something with your Nico roll here. Whoops, that's really big. So let's say you draw something, my beautiful heart here. There are a couple of ways that you can change the background. The easiest way is honestly just you have your heart on a different layer and you either create another layer and drag it below, and then that layer that's now below you can obviously color behind it, or like what we did in the tutorial today, change your background color to whatever you want. That is not a good color combination, guys. For a color theory class, I should do better. That's a little better. So that is the easiest way. But if your question is about masking, what you can do is you can use your selection tool, which looks like a little ribbon up here. I usually set it to freehand, and you can just simply draw around the edge of your object like so. I didn't do it perfectly. And then there's this add and remove at the bottom. So if I clicked on remove, what I've done is I've masked off the heart and I've have it so that I can paint on the background. So, and I'm on the wrong layer, that's why it's not working. So like that. And so if you guys can see, there's some squiggly lines in the heart. If I were to have done it the inverse and done add instead of remove, it would have been the opposite. It would have masked off the background. So hopefully that helps. You can also do alpha lock, which is what I just showed you guys too today, is on the layer where there's the heart. You can click onto that layer and you can choose alpha lock. And what's that's done, and you can only see it in the layer panel here. See how there's like a checkerboard invisible background in this layer? So what that's done is now I can only draw on that heart layer. And I really love this feature because like, look at the cool stuff you can do. You don't have to worry about, you can't color outside the lines, right? So it's really, really fun feature to use alpha lock. And I'm glad to see people are learning in the classes. That's amazing. That's the whole goal is I'm constantly learning too, and I love learning from my students as well. So keep up the great work, everybody who's in all of the classes. Yeah, and Cynthia mentions that if you have a smaller iPad model, some people like to print out their reference or have it open on another screen like a computer or a phone. That's definitely useful too. If you have a smaller iPad, you might not want to do split screen. I used to have an iPad mini. I often talk to people about the fact that the very first iPad that I drew on was a mini. It was so tiny. Now I look at that, it's such a tiny screen, but I loved it. I just zoomed in a lot and I always had my reference on my phone because, first of all, split screen did not exist back then. And then, second of all, it would have been too small anyway. Well, thanks so much, guys. If you don't have any other questions, I might say goodbye and keep working on my portrait here. I think it's getting close to done. I kind of like the crazy abstract direction that it's taken. We started off monochromatic. Then we started to veer into analogous colors. And now, I don't know, it's a little bit complementary, still somewhat monochromatic. It's something, but I definitely think we used a lot of our color theory today. So thank you so much for joining me. I really can't wait to see what you guys create. And remember that you can sign up for any of my Sketchy Procreate classes in the Sketchy Art School. There are links here on YouTube to the current class, which is our Color Fun class. So if you have enjoyed talking about color and want to learn more about that, that's a great new class to join. Okay, thank you so much, guys. Have a great day. Bye.